about the suspect. We strive to give the victims the dignity and respect that they deserve, as well as shine the light of public attention on the victims. Therefore, we are identifying them now. Please know that while all of the victims' families have been notified, they are suffering a horrific loss. So, I ask everyone who is listening to keep them in your thoughts and show them the care and heartfelt compassion that they deserve. None of the families want to do media interviews at this time, and I ask everyone to respect their request. We respect all of our community members, including our LGBTQ community. Therefore, we will be identifying the victims by how they identified themselves and how are he, him. Derek Rump. Derek's pronouns are he, him. Ashley Paugh, that's P-A-U-G-H. Ashley's pronouns are she, her. Raymond Green Vance. Raymond's pronouns are he, him. I wanted to ensure that every victim, family member, and friends of victims, and all of our community members know that our officers and detectives will continue to be diligent and thorough in our work to hold the suspects accountable for these horrendous acts. I also want to reiterate that the Colorado Springs Police Department and that I am standing beside you as we move through and come to a conclusion in the investigation and seek justice for all of our victims. As I end, I ask that everyone in our community and around the world honor each victim lived. I want to take a moment of silence to honor those community members who lost a loved one. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. I also want to identify the two heroes who intervened inside of Club Q. Their exact actions are part of the investigation, so we can't discuss the specifics out of respect for the judicial process.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon. Thank you for being here. As Mayor of Colorado Springs, and frankly on behalf of all the citizens of Colorado Springs, I want to again express our heartfelt condolences and unwavering support to the victims, their families, the LGBTQ plus community, and everyone affected by this tragedy. I had the opportunity before I came here today to talk to Richard Fierro, identified as one of the two heroes that subdued the suspect in this case, and in my opinion, I think the opinion of everyone involved, saved a lot of lives. Out from the city, our region, and frankly, from across the country, expressing their love and support for Colorado Springs and the Club Q community. And speaking of the Club Q community, we are joined here today by two co-owners of the club, Matthew Haynes and Nick Gizeka. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the support you've shown and the cooperation in making sure that you help us reach out to the community and help us serve the ends of justice in this case. A lot of people are wanting to know how they can help. We know that the victims and their families need our immediate and long-term support. And I want to tell you about the Colorado Healing Fund. That's a fund that's been in existence for some time. Actually, it was utilized during the Boulder tragedy where several people were killed in Boulder some time ago. It's set up to provide a secure way to donate to victims and family members in incidents such as this, and they are ready and able, and they've already talked about appropriating money existing in the fund to the clubq shooting victims. And what I want to emphasize to the public is that if you choose to donate through the Colorado Healing Fund at coloradohealingfund.com, you can be absolutely assured your donations are going to the right place. Now, for people needing support during this emotional time, the Colorado Springs Police Department is hosting a community resource expo to provide our community members with the help they need in navigating the variety of emotions they may be experiencing surrounding this event. That expo is being held at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Kevin O'Neill a.m. to 7 p.m. The expo is providing mental health resources, spiritual support, emotional support, animal support, child care, emergency financial resources, LGBTQ plus support, meals, and other services. Basically, whatever any person adversely impacted by this incident, whatever their needs are, they can help in supporting their needs. The event is designed to be an inclusive and safe space for all community members to gather, grieve, and obtain the support they need to cope during this difficult time. If you need this, I'm speaking to the public, please take advantage of this resource. You can find details about both the Colorado Healing Fund and the Community Resource Expo, along with other resources at coloradosprings.gov/clubq. I'll repeat that, coloradosprings.gov/clubq. Again, on behalf of the City of Colorado Springs, I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of support. We all want to ensure that our community is not defined by this tragedy, but by our response to it. Thank you very much. Now I'll introduce Michael Allen, the District Attorney of the 4th Judicial District.
Good afternoon, everyone, and again, thank you all for being here. The devastation this violent act has had on our community cannot be measured, but we do know that we will respond to it in a strong way, that we will hold people accountable as we identify what charges should be filed in this case. It's imperative to note that the investigation continues and will likely last for some time. It's very common in homicide cases that the investigation continues clear up to and sometimes even during a trial in front of a jury, and that will likely be the case here. There have been reports in the media and in the public that charges have been filed. That is not true. Any case like this, an arrest warrant will be written up that is supported by a probable cause affidavit, and that will be submitted to a judge for approval of the arrest of a suspect. That has occurred here in this case. Any charges that are associated with an arrest warrant are only preliminary charges. It's also very customary, and it is the case here, that the arrest warrant and accompanying PC affidavit is sealed. That is to protect the investigation, to make sure that we have a strong investigation, that we have the ability to proceed forward with a strong prosecution. At some point in the coming days, that seal will be lifted and the arrest warrant and PC affidavit will be available to the public and to the media. Once the case is transferred to us for formal charging, we will review the evidence and then determine final charges. It is also very customary that final charges may be different than what is in the arrest affidavit. Typically, there will be more charges in a case like this when we do formal charging than what is actually listed in the arrest affidavit. So don't be surprised when you see a different list of charges when we finally file formal charges with the court. Once the suspect, it is also very customary. We will have a first appearance scheduled with the court. That should happen in the next couple of days, I would guess. Typically, there will be more charges in a case like this when we do formal charging than what is actually listed in the arrest affidavit. So don't be surprised when you see a different list of charges when we finally file formal charges with the court. Once the suspect is released from the hospital, we will have a first appearance scheduled with the court. That should happen in the next couple of days, I would guess, although that is still to be determined by his care providers at the hospital. That appearance will be by video, so he will be in the jail and be appearing by video. We will advise the suspect at that time of the arrest charges and his bond status. He is being held without bond, so he will not have the opportunity to be bonded out. Within a few days of that first appearance is when we will return to the courtroom and file the formal charges with the court. That'll again be another bond advisement by the court, as well as potential punishments that the suspect will be facing as it relates to the charges that we file from the DA's office. It's important to note that we are not going to try this case in the media. We will only share information that we can share, and that is not to cause frustration in the community or deprive the media of information that the public absolutely wants. It is to protect that prosecution effort. We have an interest in making sure that any conviction we achieve in a case like this can withstand the appeal process. So we'll be very careful about the information that we share, at least as it relates to the DA's office. But that obligation that we have ethically extends to the investigation team as well. So oftentimes when you ask questions of them, and they defer and say that they can't answer it, or because it's they're trying to protect the investigation, that's because my obligation of being tight with the information extends to the investigation team as well. So don't hold that against them. You can hold that against me. At this point, I would turn it over to U.S. Attorney Cole Finnegan. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the United States Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice, we want to express our deepest sympathies and condolences to the victims and to their families and to all those who were part of the awful incidents roughly 36 hours ago at Club Q. We are committed to working with District Attorney Michael Allen, Mayor John Suthers, Chief Vasquez, local law enforcement, and our federal partners to bring justice to the people who suffered in this instance, and to bring justice to those people who are all involved. This is an awful moment, and we pledge on behalf of our office and the Department of Justice that we will work as hard as we can to find justice in this instance. Thank you.
Hopefully I can cut off a couple of questions with these answers. So a couple of things moving forward for everybody to be aware of. As you've heard multiple times, this is still an ongoing investigation. We expect to be at the scene for the forthcoming days. It's not going to be over quickly. It is going to be done thoroughly and appropriately. We'll continue to partner with our federal partners throughout this process. Currently, people who have vehicles in the parking lot will start receiving phone calls from our detectives to release those vehicles to the registered owners. If those vehicles belongs to victims, then we will use our victim advocacy unit and detectives to work with those families. If somebody is the registered owner of a vehicle, they know that they left there and they are not contacted, or they had loaned that vehicle to somebody else, you can call us at the Colorado Springs Police Department's non-emergency line, which is 719-444-7000, and a detective will touch base with you to make sure we get that car returned to that registered owner. Additionally, at the conclusion of this conference, we will be releasing pictures of the victims that were provided by the family. These are the pictures that the family would like to be released so that everybody remembers them as they remember them. That will be done through our social media accounts, so you'll be able to get the high quality pictures there. That is all of the information we have to share at this point in time. I'll open it up to questions and then we'll pick the most appropriate person. Just be patient. There's a lot of people here. And to make sure that everybody who is watching knows what the question is asked, I will go ahead and repeat it, or if one of the other individuals comes up to answer it, we will repeat it before we provide that answer. So we'll start this way. Sir?
Tony Gorman, Colorado Public Radio. Were you aware of the suspect's previous interaction with police, and why wasn't the red flag law pursued before this happened?
Yes, sir. So the question was about prior interactions with police and our red flag law. I will let Mr. Allen, our district attorney, answer that.
Thank you for that question. This is going to be a very unsatisfying answer as it relates specifically to part of your question. The red flag question is something that I think none of us up here are in a position to answer. But as it relates to the first part of your question, I want to talk about this in a way that hopefully makes sense to everybody. Colorado has very restrictive sealing laws. What that means is that if a case is filed in a courtroom in the state of Colorado and it is dismissed for any reason, whether that is because the prosecution dismisses it or the court dismisses it, it is automatically sealed. That is a change in the law that occurred back in 2019, so only 3 years ago. That same statute requires us to give very specific answers to questions about cases that may or may not be under a seal order under the scenario that I just gave you. That statute requires us to say, in response to questions about it, that no such record exists. So when you ask questions about specific prior instances, that will be our specific answer, but I want to give you a reason why that's the answer that we're giving. I acknowledge that it is very unsatisfying at this point. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we can share more about that, but at this stage, that's the best we can give you, and that's going to be the same answer for everybody up here. It's really the design behind that is to protect persons that have been accused of crime and been charged, and then the case is dismissed. The idea behind it is that that person shouldn't have to carry that charge around with them for the rest of their lives if there's no way to convict them of that charge. That's the design behind it. I know that's an unsatisfying answer, but that's the status of the law as it exists right now. If it changes to that specific thing that you're asking about, I'll be passing that information out. So the mayor just brought up a good point, and it relates to the red flag law. The DA's office doesn't play a part in the red flag law. That would be up to a law enforcement agency. That's why I say nobody in this group can really answer that specific question. It has to be initiated by law enforcement or a member of the public, not by the DA's office.
Sir?
As of October, the El Paso sheriffs have never filed for an extreme risk protection order since the law has been passed, and Colorado Springs PD has filed 2. My question is for Mayor Southers and Chief Vasquez. Mayor Southers, would you like to see local law enforcement utilize that law to try to prevent future tragedies? And Chief Vasquez, does this tragedy, given the previous interaction that El Paso sheriffs had with the suspected shooter, change your perspectives on her folks?
So the question was regarding to the red flag law and the police department, not related to this investigation, but previously had used that red flag law, and then asking the mayor for his comment regarding the potentiality of using that law. Is that a fair brief?
Sure.
Okay.
My view of the red flag law is that it was passed by the legislature. It's the law in Colorado, and law enforcement agencies in appropriate circumstances should take advantage of it and utilize the law. That's my view of it. I don't run a law enforcement agency, but that's would be my advice to law enforcement agencies. I would caution against an assumption that the circumstance of this case would lead to application of the red flag law. We don't know that. I would caution any conclusion either way or not. As the district attorney indicated, hopefully there'll be a time when there can be a specific discussion about any prior interaction with the with law enforcement, and I think it would those circumstances would cause one to be able to make commentary about potential application of the red flag law, but I think it's premature to do so now.
So you question whether somebody calling a bomb threat and holding themselves up in a house and having a standoff with police would prompt extreme risk protection?
You're assuming that there's credible evidence of all that, as opposed to someone reporting it and that the prosecutor had evidence of that, and I would not make assumptions of that nature.
I would just echo the mayor's stance on the red flag law. It is currently a law in Colorado. My stance has not changed on it. If law enforcement has credible information that fits within the parameters of the red flag law, then we should take action on that. That's what the law is, and it allows us to do that, and we should take those actions. But as the mayor says, we have to have the right information, the probable cause. We have to have credible information to be able to do that. So if we do, then of course we should act on it.
Yes, ma'am. The question was, is there any other suspects? That's part of the ongoing investigation. At this time, we have one identified suspect in custody. Yes, sir.
Our sources tell us there's a lone gun that was used, and the lone gun that was used was a ghost gun. Can you all confirm that? And also, there's another firearm in this that apparently was bought illegally from an unlicensed dealer in Florida. Can you comment on that as well?
So the question was about the information that there was a long gun involved, as well as another firearm, and the sources of those firearms. That is also part of the ongoing investigation. And at this point in time, it'd be inappropriate for us to comment on where those were found and where they were obtained from. Yes?
The preliminary charges include bias charges, and many people in the local LGBTQ community would like to understand the motivation behind that incident. Can you articulate what prompted those specific charges, or can you speak to the shooter's motivations here?
Okay, so the question was twofold. One, about the charges of the bias charges, and then one about the motivation. I can tell you that motivation is obviously a part of every criminal investigation that we do. That is part of the current investigation. I can't speak any further about any motive. And then the second part regarding the charges, I'll hand over to our district attorney, Mr. Allen.
So a quirk in criminal law is that we don't have to prove, when we go to a court, we don't have to prove motive. But obviously we're all humans, and we want to know what caused somebody to go in and do something as horrific as this. So that's why we just heard from the PIO that's being investigated. It's important that if we have enough evidence to support bias-motivated crimes, to charge that. It's important for this community. It's important for the prosecution effort to show why something happened. And if there's enough evidence to support that in this case, when we get to the formal filing charges, we will absolutely be including those charges here as well. But I want to also be clear that the bias-motivated statute in Colorado, the highest level charge that we can get with that charge is a Class 4 felony. We're obviously talking about 5 people that were killed. Their lives were ended. Those are going to be the top end charges in this case, without a doubt. Those charges will likely carry life in prison without parole, whereas the class 4 felonies are probation eligible offenses. So those do not in any way elevate the potential sentence in a case like this, but it is important to let the community know that we do not tolerate bias motivated crimes in this community, that we support communities that have been maligned, harassed, and intimidated and abused. And that's one way that we can do that, showing that we will put the money where our mouth is, essentially, and make sure that we try it that way. So I hope that answers your question, but we're going to absolutely be reviewing it for formal charges along those same lines.
Yes, sir.
Is the U.S. Attorney's Office going to be charging suspects with federal hate crimes?
So the question is the U.S. Attorney's Office going to be charging federal hate crimes? Mr. Finnegan?
Thank you for your question. There's an ongoing investigation, and we really can't comment further at this time, but we are reviewing all the facts. We're reviewing all the information that we have, and we're working closely with the District Attorney's Office, with the FBI, with the ATF, and with Chief Vasquez and his department. So I just want to reiterate and reaffirm that the Department of Justice is looking at all aspects of this case. Thank you.
Any previous threats to clubq?
The question was, were there any previous threats to the club? I think we have very clearly said that this club was a safe haven in our community, and that's something to be respected and honored. I want it to be very clear that this club, from the police department's perspective, was no issue. We had a good relationship with them. There weren't issues at this club. As far as if there were prior threats, again, that would be part of any investigation and would be a part of this investigation.
Have investigators been looking into social media posts, online writings, any violent tendencies specifically towards LGBTQ?
Yeah, so this is similar to the question of past history, motive, but specific to social media. In this day and age, social media is where everybody's at. So, of course, we're looking at social media in every investigation that we do, whether that be from a very basic patrol investigation all the way up to the most significant.
Were we able to actually confirm the shooter is also the person we have all been talking about from last year on this
The question is that is the shooter from today, or from not today, from the clubq incident, the same individual as I believe the bomb threat you said, sir? I'm going to let Mr. Allen answer that.
Spencer, good question, but it's a question that we cannot answer at this time for the reasons I gave earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Melissa Henry with KKTV. If hypothetically this suspect did have a prior criminal history and those documents were sealed at this time, this might be for District Attorney Allen, what process would have to be gone through and who would be responsible for getting those documents unsealed, and is that something your office is interested in pursuing?
The question was, if they're under Colorado law, if something is sealed, what is the process to unseal them?
So I'm going to answer this question in very general terms, not as it relates to this case, and I hope that will satisfy what you're driving at. Generally speaking, if a case gets dismissed and then a person commits a subsequent offense, it's very common that we can look back at that prior offense to see if there's some connection to that prior offense to the current offense. We do that in almost every case where somebody has a prior. Sometimes we will try to use that prior incident in the new case. To do that, we have to file motions, 404B, which is prior bad acts motions. If it's appropriate to do that in a case like this, then we will do that. Absolutely.
Would that motion be public record, and what timeline would that happen?
too premature to tell what timeline that may or may not be on for the reasons that I stated earlier as it relates to this specific incident and what you're asking about. But it should be available publicly if a motion is filed along the lines that you're describing.
I think you, oh, nope, sorry, right next to you, I think she has her hand up.
Was law enforcement monitoring Aldrich at any time before the shooting?
I'm sorry, was law enforcement monitoring what?
Aldrich, the suspect.
Were we monitoring the suspect? Was that your question? I think the best way to address that is that as we've talked about, any prior interactions with law enforcement would be considered as part of this case. Monitoring somebody goes into a lot of different areas, but we only investigate individuals that are accused of crimes. So monitoring, the way you said it, almost implies that we monitor people just in general, and that we do not do. Sir.
Has the suspect said anything to authorities, and give us his condition right now?
Okay, so the question was if the suspect has made any statements and the suspect's condition. The condition part of it I can answer for you, and that is what we have said from the beginning. There were injuries and that they are being treated at a local hospital. We are not going to share any further details about an individual's medical condition. For the second part of your question, state that again for me.
Has the suspect said anything to authorities?
Has the suspect said anything or made a statement to authorities? Again, I will refer to Mr. Allen.
So one of the principles in our Constitution is that we all have the right to remain silent if we choose to, and if a person exercises that right to remain silent, it can't be used against them. For that reason, we are not going to comment on whether the person has made any comments or not made comments in this investigation. That will come out in due time, though.
Yes, sir, red jacket.
Just to follow up on the condition of the suspect, could you tell us what condition he was in at the time of his arrest? I.e., was he conscious?
Again, we won't go into the specifics of their injuries. Black shirt? Ma'am? Yes.
Can you confirm the ages of victims?
I do not have that with me, but we can look into that to share with everybody. Was there anybody? Yes, sir.
Do you believe at this point that the suspect had ever been in clubq before the shooting on Saturday?
That would be part of our investigation. The question was, had the suspect prior or visited the club prior? Again, part of our ongoing investigation. Somebody who hasn't asked any questions? All right. Black jacket, you haven't asked any.
Someone in law enforcement do a welfare check on his mother in the prior months?
I do not have that information, but that would be part of the investigation potentially. But again, you're asking about somebody who is not identified as the suspect in this investigation. All right. Is any of the other questions that are going up, are they related to something new, or are they something that we've already covered about 10 times over? Okay. Yes, sir.
So, what was security like at clubq prior to this incident? What was it like the night of the shooting? And also, it may have been answered already, were the guns acquired illegally or not?
Yeah, so the guns question has already been asked, and that's part of the investigation. The question about the security, I think, implies that the trying to put responsibility somewhere else. Of course, we would look at what they might have as far as surveillance evidence, but we really want to keep the focus on actions, not looking to blame. Today is about identifying the victims and the heroes in this situation. And that's what we really want our community to know, is there were two individuals who acted heroically. And we agree this saved lives. And then again, we lost 5 people, and there are families grieving. So we really want to stay focused and make sure that that focus truly stays on those victims. They are lost to their families, and their importance to them cannot be overstated. for real questions, or I'll give you one more chance. You are going to make the break it for if we ask any other questions.
Y'all ask y'all questions.
Sir, you're up to see if we have anything new.
Spell the names of the two people who intervened to stop the shooter, and also can you provide any more clarity as to the condition of the additional wounded and shot who are now receiving treatment?
Yeah, I will get you the spelling of the names. That will be part of when we release the victims as well. We'll get you the spellings of those names. Okay, hold on one second. Let me answer the second question. The condition of our victims, again, we have to respect their right to privacy and their injuries. They had varying levels of injuries, as we said in our release. We had 17 people who suffered from gunshot wounds. I have not been shot, but I can't imagine being shot anywhere is something that anybody wants to do. So we again care about our citizens and our victims, and won't do that. We do have somebody from Penrose Hospital if they would like to add additional information to that or like make a statement. Mr. Patrick.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Sharp. I am the CEO of Centura Penrose Hospital. First of all, I just, on behalf of the Centura Healthcare System, want to extend our condolences to the victims' families, and all those affected by this senseless tragedy. What I can tell you is we have 3 patients still at Penrose. They are in stable condition. I'm not going to provide any further details other than that. They do have support networks with them. And I do want to thank all the healthcare providers, not just at Penrose, but across all the healthcare systems that rose to the occasion to help the needs of the people that were coming into our ERs, again, with this tragic event. And also a big thank you to all the first responders that collaborated with the healthcare providers. It's an honor to be part of that, and in this very sad situation.
That goes to the point that you can articulate the status of folks who are in hospital. I don't know if there are folks still in other hospitals other than this hospital, but if you could articulate how many folks are still critical, how many are in lesser conditions still in hospital. That would help.
Okay, I understand that. At this point, we don't have that information to share. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, and thank everybody who is out there watching and the goodwill that they are sending our community and our victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It says it's about 10 minutes.
Okay.
It's heading back towards north. And we're trying to think of, I can't think of the exit. I know you don't like putting things in your phone. If you put the directions in your phone, it'll take you right there. Okay. Or you can, yeah.
When I came down the street.
And we'll, you can park up front or in back of the building. I'll find you and take you on the 3rd floor. Take you up.
So let's go back up.
We should
Are we
probably
going to go back up and reconnoiter?
Yeah. Hang on.
Could the owners go to the podium?